Okay, last time we finished up the entire root of the fall, this process by which you came to believe that something was wrong with you and that you were unworthy, broken, unlikable, unlovable, less than, and bad. In this episode, we're going to talk about how you behaved because of these beliefs and how it set up the funk, a pattern of behavior originating from this place of brokenness that you've been running over and over and over and over again. But you probably already know that you have a pattern. You probably already know that there are things that keep happening no matter who you're with or what environment you're in. You just haven't known how to stop it. So let's figure it out. Last time, we really dissected the fall. The fall is what I call 50-cent beliefs. So the fall really sits at the center of that apex. If your world spins around like this and you have an alignment center, and that center of alignment, when we talk about the fall, is really this idea of something is wrong with me. Something is wrong with me sits at the epicenter or the apex of this alignment. From something is wrong with me, you decided or you answered the question, why? Why is something wrong with me? And you filled out a story. And that story was, I'm broken, I'm unvaluable, I'm unworthy, I'm unlikable, I'm unlovable, whatever your particular flavor of story arc or storyline was. You developed that storyline in order to stabilize chaos in your life. Something happened, you were responding to it out of a stress response. You felt a lot of pain because of the criticism you received or people not understanding the situation correctly and misdiagnosing it in a way that gave criticism to you, or their opinions were negative about you, or your opinions were negative about yourself. And you created this story in order to stabilize things. Not only did you create a story, you created a feel-good resolve in order to avoid pain. You wanted to stop feeling pain and you wanted to feel pleasure. So you created a character, a persona, a myth, an archetype in order to allow you to feel pleasure or avoid pain. And that persona was born out of a feel-good resolve. And in the previous episodes, we really go deep on some of the personas and what they could be. And we also ask you to fill in a persona that we didn't think of that also might map to that. But this was the whole story arc of the fall, right? Something is wrong with me. I know what's wrong with me. I can answer the question why. I developed a story for it and a persona to be the hero because I, my true self, am the villain of the story. And so the hero of the story is this persona that I'm going to create that's going to handle everything I can't handle and is going to cope with the situation that I can't cope with and will come in to save the day. And that way I can feel pleasure and not feel pain. But the search for pleasure is not really pleasure. It's actually search for safety. And that desire for safety is centered around this idea of survival. And at the core of this quest for survival is this sentence, I must survive at all costs. I must survive at all costs. So we're going to dig deep today on this axis shift from you spinning around your true self to you spinning around this mission of I must survive at all costs. Survival then becomes the gravitational center once you execute all of these behaviors, these 50-cent behaviors. And if you guys don't know what 50 cents means, go back. I talk all about this particular minted coin set and how I decided I was 50 cents on the dollar. Everyone else was a full dollar, but I was 50 cents. And that gave me an external representation of my internal reality. And it was the story arc in its fullness. Everyone else was a full dollar and I was 50 cents. Therefore, it justified my behavior of hustling for worthiness, hustling and showcasing my acceptability and my value so that other people would accept me and not reject me. That is the entirety of the fall. The funk is all the behaviors that come out from that. Once survival becomes the mission. So the death of your actual self is really the birth of this need to control everything, because what died is your trust in life, your trust in people, your trust in yourself to be able to handle things. And so it births this need for control. It converted a moment of pain into a mission of protection. And the person that you were protecting is yourself. I want to read you a little bit from the American Institute of Stress. Yes, that is apparently an institution. And so this is what the American Institution of Stress says about the fight or flight response. And again, there are actually 4 responses. We know it, or for those who are maybe less familiar with it, you know it as the fight or flight response. But there's actually 4 stress responses, and they are fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And we're going to dig deep on those today. Okay, so the American Institute of Stress says the fight or flight response, also known as the acute stress response. So this isn't like, oh, it's a little stressful. This is an acute stress response, refers to a psychological reaction that occurs in the presence of something that is terrifying, either mentally or physically. The response is triggered by a release of hormones. So in your brain determines that something is a threat, and that sends out all of these emotions to your entire body through your nervous system. And that then causes your body to execute a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And this release of hormones prepares your body to either stay and deal with the threat, or run away to safety, or freeze in the face of it, or appease. Those are fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. These are responses enacted to ensure your survival. So Sherry Gaba breaks down these 4 stress reactions. Remember, it's acute stress, not little bit of stress. These are acute stress reactions. As follows. Flight includes running or fleeing from a situation. Fight is to defend, prove, or deny. That is fight. Freeze is to literally become incapable of moving or making a choice. And fawn includes immediately moving to try to please a person to avoid any conflict. Those are flight, fight, freeze, and fawn. If you believe you need to survive, you have made this determination because the world is unsafe and people are the enemy. And here's what's really crazy. I'm going to read you a little bit of what I wrote. This is on page 121 of the workbook. It is important to remember your survival instincts were likely rooted in very real, unsafe, and uncomfortable situations where people or circumstances caused harm. It was real. But when survival reactions grow out of a 50-cent belief that something is wrong with me, a major shift takes place in how we handle the fear we experience in life. We no longer try to get help from others. We decide to handle it ourselves. The reason why this is so profound is it not only have you disassociated yourself from yourself when you've decided something's wrong with you, and you've answered the question, why is something wrong with you, with a storyline that says, I'm unworthy, I'm broken, I'm unlovable, unlikable, not valuable, less than. You have disassociated yourself from yourself. You disassociate from yourself when you create another persona. That persona begins living the life you were designed to live. You are now performing life instead of living it. So you have completely disassociated from yourself. When survival becomes your mission, and when you execute an acute stress response, you are responding to the stress through fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. You are deciding to handle it yourself. That is how you have chosen to handle the circumstance of this stress, whatever the source is. But in that execution of a stress response, you actually also disassociate from others. You're no longer trying to get help from others. So you are completely a siloed being. You're not connected to yourself. You're not connected to others. This is such a dark mission, this mission of survival. It's like a mission with the lights out. It's just really brutal. Okay. We're going to dig into all of these 4 stress reactions. I want you to leave the door open to the reality that you likely execute all of them. Some of them at the same time, but you likely know all of these stress reactions personally: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. You may have one that you like to default to, but different circumstances may have warranted different stress reactions within you. So you probably have a deep familiarity to all of these stress reactions. The other thing I'm going to say is, I'm going to preface this with this. The personas that I read in the previous section of defining the fall and the feel-good personas that you created were actually mapped to these stress responses. So I'm going to go through these stress responses, and then I'm going to go quickly through the archetypes or the personas that were developed and how they map to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. That might do 2 things. It might, number 1, be an aha moment where you're like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. I generally default to X stress reaction. Let's use me. I generally default to the fawn stress reaction. Therefore, it's so explainable why I would have created the cheerleader persona. The cheerleader is a fawner. So you might have that aha moment, and you, in the absence of maybe being able to define your persona, you might be more able to define your stress reaction default, or the one that you prefer to execute the most. And that might lead you into understanding what feel-good persona you may have created. Okay. Da-da-da. Let's dig into the survival reaction of flight. Okay, so for me, really quickly, a personal story. Actually, I'm going to move these around. So the first one that I do is flight. So for me, when all of this was happening in my house, I'd fallen out of a 2-story window, hit my head, was never the same, woke up in the middle of the night with all of these wicked neurological symptoms, chief of which was, I'm going to vomit, and any moment I didn't. I just sat there hovering over the toilet bowl with waves and waves and waves of fear and anxiety and panic washing over me, nothing happening. There was a misdiagnosis, not only that nothing was wrong with me, but that I might be jealous of my baby brother. That, of course, engendered me to criticism about who I was as a person. I also criticized myself. What kind of person is jealous of her brother? I developed envy around people that didn't seem to have a problem with vomiting, because for me, it incited so much fear. And so I decided that how I handled the situation was abnormal and how other people handled it was normal. And so I began seeing myself as some type of abhorrent. I handled situations in a fashion that wasn't good. And when I encountered a closed door in the middle of the night outside of my parents' bedroom, I absolutely melted down. And I said to myself, I never want to feel this level of rejection again. And I developed a feel-good persona. The whole situation was way beyond my ability to cope. So way beyond my ability to cope. I was a small child. I had traumatic brain injury. No one could help me. I felt so scared all the time. Fear was coursing through my veins. And now, for whatever reason, and again, my parents will say they never locked a door against me, and I believe them. Somehow the handle didn't turn, or I didn't perceive it to turn. And I just felt this tsunami, this brick wall of rejection. And in the encountering of that brick wall of rejection, I decided I was never going to feel that level of pain again. And I was going to create a feel-good persona. And that feel-good persona was the cheerleader. And the cheerleader developed this stress reaction, fawn. But like I said, you likely perform a combination of all of these stress reactions. So one of the things I did is I fled. and I fled to a neighbor's house. My mom's best friend where we grew up was a woman named Anne, who was provided mental health services for the city that we lived in. And I found her so fascinating. So fascinating. And she would talk to me about all these crazy people. And somehow, in talking about crazy people, crazy existed outside of me. It wasn't me. I wasn't crazy. If I could talk about crazy people, I wasn't crazy. And I fled to her house often to talk to her, to watch videos, to read books about therapy and, the makings of different personalities, because I was certain if I could read about it or watch it, then it wouldn't be me. So I fled to Anne's house. What a person who flees looks like is they avoid contact, they ghost, they quit jobs or end relationships abruptly. They have excessive busyness or are super productive or lean into different distractions. They are constantly relocating or always planning the next thing. They daydream, they escape, they have idealism without any action. So they are just fleeing, whether in their mind or whether actually in the world. They are flighters. They are fleers. How this achieves safety. So again, we don't do these things. We likely in our childhood tried a bunch of these behaviors on and decided the one that seemed to work for us best. But it did achieve a certain level of safety. Because remember, safety is the goal. Survival is the mission. And we're all of our behaviors spin around this axis of needing to survive. So how someone who flees achieves safety is they think, if I can get away from this, I'll be okay. If I can get away from this, I'll be okay. Motion becomes their medication. Busyness becomes worthiness, and survival means disappearing. And I love the phrase, catch me if you can. That is how it achieves safety. And how it feels good, if only temporarily, is when someone flees a situation, they get relief, clarity, or lightness. Again, even temporarily. So I was someone, we'll talk about this much later on, but I was someone who did a lot of relocating. And I fled circumstances. And, I always had this sense of like, I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I don't know. And so when I moved for a 6-month period of time, I had a lot of clarity because there was a lot of things for me to do. I had to find a place. I had to move into that place. I had to organize the moving. I had to find where I was going to do my laundry, where I was going to grocery shop. There was just a lot of clarity for a moment. That's how it felt good to me. Another way it might feel good for those fleeing situations is they get a dopamine hit from planning or starting something new. So it just feels good to be concentrated on whatever it is that they're planning or starting instead of whatever their circumstances are that make them feel unsafe. They also experience an absence of conflict that feels like peace. So they may have momentarily gotten away from a person or a situation, but unless you resolve the way you handle stress responses and the whole thing of something is wrong with me at the core, you're just going to recreate the same situation everywhere you go. So for a moment, you've escaped the person or the situation that feels threatening, but it's only momentary. Why it's understandable. They're obviously, again, a lot of times these circumstances, these behaviors, these 50-cent beliefs formed in childhood when we just tried to make sense of the world and bring stability or order to chaos. It's understandable how someone developed a stress reaction to their circumstances through flighting or fleeing from the circumstance. Because in a world where proximity meant pain, where whatever they were close to created pain, fleeing or flight says, I'll never be trapped again. It's not about running away. It's trying to breathe. If you are someone who flees, I want you to write down, this is in page 123 in the workbook, what does your flight survival response look like? So I read, again, I've said this a million times, but I'm going to say it one more time because I can never say it enough. I am not the beginning and the end of all knowledge around this subject. Most likely you are. This workbook is authored by you, not by me. So if you decide that you are someone who flees, that's your preferred stress response. And I read a couple ideas of what that might look like because it's not my core stress response. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a coach. I'm not a psychiatrist. And I'm not a person who's even lived through that where fleeing was my core default stress response. You likely will have things to add. So I'd ask you two things. Number one, add it in the workbook, write it down. And number two, add it to the comments. Because this content is only as rich as the community that supports it, right? Like I can only share my perspective. I can only share what I've researched and what I've found out. But you living in the petri dish are going to be far more valuable than my thoughts on this subject. Okay. So write it down. Where did you flee to and why? And what made you feel loved, accepted, good, safe in the location you fled to? Okay. That is the stress response. Flee. Now we're going to look at fighting. So I told you that I went to Anne's house. Not only did I go to Anne's house, but Anne once gave me a t-shirt, which she just gave me hers. So I apparently bought two of them, one for her, one for me. We were matchy. And it said, people with mental illnesses enrich our lives. And it was a whole block of names. And it had like, oh gosh, I can't even remember all the names. And I think it was like Abraham Lincoln and people that dealt with, depression or schizophrenia, or like it just had a whole list of mental illnesses. And there was this whole block of names. And I wore that shirt until the names wore off. And Anne has since given me hers. And I have that in a very safe location because I treasure that shirt. It was another symbol. We talked about symbols in some of the previous content, about the symbols we create to bring a visual manifestation to an internal reality or an internal thought process or belief. We seek to symbolize that through visualization, through symbols. And so this t-shirt was my way of saying, again, these people are crazy. I am not crazy. These people are crazy. And so that was my symbol. And that was, in a way, a fight. I was proving or defending. I was trying to control the narrative about me by saying, no, you don't understand. This is the narrative, not I am crazy, Cordelia is crazy. Instead, these people are crazy. And so fight often looks like control. So it's a preemptive strike that destroys others and or an argument before they can be destroyed. They connect feeling safe to being in charge. So safety equals being in charge. Oftentimes people who fight burn bridges and call it protection. And it can be often a disproportionate aggressive response to situations that result in very little chance of relational repair or reconciliation. Fighting is about proving and defending and controlling. That's a fight. How it achieves safety. It's really one way and one way only. It establishes a hierarchy to avoid vulnerability. If I am in control of you/the narrative, I am on top and you are on bottom. I control everything. If I stay in charge, no one can hurt me. How it feels good, even if temporarily. If someone is a fighter, they feel powerful, in control, and competent. And this is something I have seen personally firsthand, but I also, in the moments that I have fought, definitely feel this myself, a rush of adrenaline that mimics confidence. It's not actual confidence. It's this rush of adrenaline that feels really good. But when that adrenaline passes, all your insecurities come back up. It can also feel good, even if only temporarily, because it replaces feeling helpless with action. Fighting, the fight or flight response is a sympathetic nervous system response. So sympathetic, you have two two branches of your nervous system. You have the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. Sympathetic executes the fight or flight action response. Parasympathetic shuts down that action response and puts a body into like rest and digest. So you need the balance of these two branches of your nervous system in order to maintain balance. You can't always be in fight or flight, otherwise you'd burn yourself out. And you can't always be in rest or digest, otherwise you do like nothing. You just always be resting, right? And so you need a balance between these two branches of your nervous system. But when you are either fighting or fleeing, the brain says we're in danger. It sends out a rush of hormones into your nervous system. The fight or flight nervous system is an action-based nervous system, and it puts you in motion. Either you're going to fight the person in front of you or you're going to run from it. When someone basically dismisses you or rejects you or marginalizes you or puts you to the side, they are ignoring you. When you fight them with a big fat punch to the face or a burned bridge or over disproportionate sense of aggression, you are up in their grill and they cannot ignore you. And that is why it's understandable. It's an understandable reaction in a world where you felt dismissed. It's not actually about violence. It's about not being voiceless. That's what the fight response is about. Okay, so on page 125 in the workbook, if you are a fighter, I want you to write down, what does your fight survival response look like? Who or what did you fight? How does fighting make you feel better? And how does it make you feel safe? So write it down. If you are a freezer, I want to read this to you. This is an article in an article published by the National Institutes of Health entitled Freeze for Action. How weird is that? Freeze for Action. Neurobiological mechanism in animal and human freezing says this about the freeze response. Freezing is activated at intermediate levels of predator threat. So you've identified something else as predator and yourself as prey. This is a state of attentive immobility serving to avoid detection by predators and to enhance perception. Besides immobility, an important feature of freezing is the parasympathetically induced heart rate deceleration, also called bradycardia. So let me just finish this and then we'll dissect it a little bit. Freezing differentiates from the sympathetically dominated fight or flight response activated during imminent predation threat. Okay, so we talked about the two branches of your nervous system, sympathetic, fight or flight, and parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. What freeze is a parasympathetic response. And it basically, so when you think about the use case, the beneficial use case of the parasympathetic nervous system is that it relaxes you. It calms you down. If you've ever been anxious and your sympathetic nervous system is activated, you feel like this and your heart rate goes up, right? Because you're you have anxiety and you're getting ready to run or fight. And so your heart rate goes up. In the parasympathetic nervous system response, your heart rate drops. And what's so fascinating about a freeze response is that your heart rate decelerates into what's called bradycardia. So tachycardia is high heart rate. Bradycardia is low heart rate. What's important to note is neither of these are normal heart rates. These are responses to stress. So tachycardia, fast heart rate, fight or flight, sympathetic nervous system is an accelerated heart rate. Bradycardia is super low. It's like a hibernation response. It freezes you in place. What's very interesting about a heart rate slowed down to below normal level is we're trying to have our heart rate not even be detected. So if your heart is beating fast and we perceive that there's a predator in the environment, A low and slow heart rate is designed to not be perceptible to the predator. I mean, this stuff is fascinating. Freezing is a strange state of profound relaxation, hibernation almost, paired with hyper awareness. It's an effort of the human body in response to stress to attempt to slow time down. If you can slow time down, okay, this isn't just about hibernation. If you think about a bear going into hibernation, they go into hibernation, they remove themselves from the environment, they go into a cave, they slow all of their body activity down to a hibernative state. They're basically frozen, but they're not frozen, they're hibernative. I don't actually know if that's a word. They're hibernating, let's say that. The freeze response as a stress response has two very distinct activities. Number one is to slow your body down into a state of hibernation. However, you are dialed up in perception. So a bear in a cave isn't perceiving what's around it. A person who's frozen in a stress response is hyper aware. And so the heart rate almost slows time down. Tick, tick, tick. And they're seeing everything that's going on around them. Everything. So, what does a freeze response look like in a person when it's a stress response? It's a response to stress. A freezer will procrastinate, have indecision, or will have a flat affect. You'll talk to them and it's just like nothing. They're not upset. They're not sad. They're flat. They withdraw from relationships or they shut down emotionally. And I know freezers in my life, and they say this phrase on repeat. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. That's a freezer. How it achieves safety is the freezer says, if I stay still, no one else can see me or hurt me. I'm frozen. It's like if you encounter, I've used this before, but if you encounter a lizard on the road and they see what they perceive to be a predator, they'll just freeze. Numbness becomes normal. That's their normal state of being. They're numb. Again, the funk is about this state of being because you've now, your centrifugal force is around this idea that survival is your mission. So these behaviors are not just, stress reactions were developed for a reason. There are moments where you need to fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. There are very dangerous situations in which you need to escape and you need to enact one of these stress responses in order to escape. If you have internalized the schism in identity that says something is wrong with me and I know why, and you've created a storyline around a 50-cent belief that I am unworthy, I am broken, I am unlovable, I am unlikable, I am less than, you now are running survival as a mission as your everyday modus operandi. It's your operating system. So when you encounter someone who has a momentary stress response to a reaction and they numb momentarily, that's fine. But when numbness becomes normal, that's a stress response that's embedded itself in a body, and that's what they think is functional. They're surviving. They're just existing. Despair is disguised as calm. Oftentimes, you can't get a word from these people, especially in conflict. I don't know, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. They're not calm. They're in despair. Inaction feels safer than failure, and they're present, but they're not there at all. They're not actually there at all. Now, how freezing feels good, if only temporarily. Nothingness feels like a break from too muchness. Life is too much. It's all too much. It delays consequences or further hurt. So if you're not responding, you're freezing, you kind of push out the delivery of consequences, or at least I mean, some of it is just by seconds, but you're successful. It feels good. I just push that out by saying, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. You push out the consequences, even if only for a little bit, because you feel like hurt is imminent. It feels good because neutrality mimics peace. If you just stay Switzerland, it looks like peace. Why it's understandable. Why is freezing in stress understandable? In a world where being seen got you singled out or shamed, a freeze state says it's safer to disappear than to be misunderstood. It's better to vanish than be erased. When you see a person who's freezing, it's not laziness or lack of engagement. It's nervous system collapse. The parasympathetic has taken over and the entire nervous system, they can't fight or flight. They can't respond because they've gone so far below rest or digest. They're almost in a hibernative state. They're completely offline. Okay. Workbook page 127. How does your freeze survival response? What does it look like? Describe a moment in which you froze. What did your body do or feel like? What were you able to perceive about the situation while in this state? And looking back on it, how were you attempting to slow time down? Man, I love all this stuff. This stuff is just so helpful in defining this so that you can put language to it. And once you put language to it and develop an understanding around it, you can get in the business of changing your patterns and changing your axis around which you spin. Survival is not the mission. We're at the very beginning, but let me tell you the end. The end is about hope, and the end is about you being on mission that is so much more powerful than surviving. I don't want to get derailed. I could talk about that all day, but this is the topic at hand. Fawners, I'm a fawner. Most people think that fawning is passive or soft, but in reality, fawning is strategic, high output, and often high functionality. It's not weakness, it's weaponized caretaking. There is not avoidance in the fawner, but preemptive activism. So fight, flight, fawn are all active states. Fawning looks passive. It's not. Freezing is the only passive stress response. A fawner is equally in your face, just not the way you think. Certainly not like a fighter. Okay. What fawning looks like. People pleasing. Raise your hand if you're a people pleaser. Over accommodating. Can't say no. Hyper attunement to others' moods. They are like the pulse. They have their finger on everyone's pulse. They know exactly what's going on. Codependency is masked as loyalty or service. This is bizarro because fawners think that they're, really loyal to people or serving people or doing good, but often it's a codependency. They need that loop that says, you did a great job in order to feel safe. Fawning also is about dissolving boundaries to keep the peace. And my personal flavor is tolerating the intolerable, even rewarding it. When you think about Stockholm syndrome is what they often call. I think that got developed in an airplane hijacking, if I'm not mistaken. And some of the passengers fell in love with the hijackers, and ergo Stockholm. I think it happened in Stockholm, Sweden, and so ergo Stockholm syndrome. But that was tolerating the intolerable and even rewarding it. They were enmeshing themselves with people that were actually harming them. Super bizarre. Can relate to that firsthand. Just gonna say. How it achieves, well, I'm going to stop right there and read something really quickly in the book that I wrote about fawning. And again, I know a lot about fawning because it happens to be my primary default, but please add more color to your particular survival mechanism because, it can only enrich the conversation. Fawning is a concoction of cortisol and adrenaline leading to the response of abandoning our sense of self to meld into the threat-based context. So again, when you mesh with someone else, your needs become my needs, your desires become my desires. I am no person. I have no needs. I have no desires. The only thing I have in my world is you, and my entire life is going to revolve around you and yours getting your needs met and your desires. So, how it achieves safety. How it achieves safety is if I keep them happy, they won't abandon me or get rid of me. Peacekeeping becomes manipulation strategy. And this particular thing was super difficult for me to really actually accept. That fawning is manipulative. It's actually manipulative. It's trying to engender loyalty, or it looks like loyalty, but it's not. It's an exchange. I will try to meet your needs or your desires or be loyal to you. And in that exchange, you give me safety. So it's just so enmeshed. It's just so enmeshed. It also achieves safety by overgiving, overworking, over accommodating, and that becomes guilting other people into loyalty to you. And becoming irreplaceable becomes trauma bonded control. All of this is crazy manipulative, and certainly fawners do not think of it as such. In fact, honestly, all of these stress reactions are manipulative in their own way, because at the end of the day, they're trying to get survival. The they that is we're trying to survive. And in the world in which other people are present, since we're not an island unto ourselves, we're trying to get something from other people. And what we're trying to get is safety. We're trying to ensure our safety by all of these stress reactions. So how fawners feel good, if only temporarily, is external validation feels like worth. I'm a big one for showcasing my worthiness and hustling for value. It also feels good because we avoid conflict in a way that feels like connection. So even in really high conflict situations, if we just connect to people and enmesh ourselves, it feels somehow good because, like, I'm on your team. We're doing this together. Being needed feels like purpose. If I just get people to a point where they rely on me and need me, then that feels like purpose, and that purpose feels safe. This is kind of the same thing. Solving other people's problems or solving problems feels like safety, and staying in motion feels like control. Why? It's understandable. In a world where rejection and devastation reign supreme, a fawner says, if I give enough of myself, they'll keep me around. If I can get ahead of the pain, maybe I won't have to feel it. It's a preemptive strike. It's not just about avoiding rejection. It's about controlling chaos through care. It is not weakness. It is relational survival. This stuff is so good. Please tell me how you have fawned, what it looks like. If you're a fellow fawner, man, give me a little love in the chat. Let me know what your fawn response looks like. What do you usually fawn? Who do you fawn? In what circumstance do you fawn? And how do you abandon your sense of self when you fawn? How is your fawning performative engagement? And how are you doing something in order to try and avoid harm? Listen, there are several pages here in questions. I'm not going to read them all. Get the workbooks if you haven't. If you haven't, oh man. We're going to quickly go back to your personas that you developed and map your stress response to feel-good resolve personas. For those who the goal is to dominate pain before it can dominate them, the winner, the savage, the protector are fighters. This is a fight stress response. The winner, the hyperachiever, to win at all costs. Remember, this is survival is the mission, but the objective is to achieve survival at all costs. So the fighter is going to dominate other people and pain before it can dominate them. So the winner, the savage, the protector. Those who flee, they often develop feel-good personas, the goal of which is to outrun pain before it catches up to them. And flighters are the chameleon, the dreamer, the nomad. Anywhere but here, man. Anywhere but here. Those who freeze, who lock up, who go real low and slow, those are the observers, the ghosts, the stoic. And the fawners, who seek to appease people or manage pain before it lashes out. So the preemptive strike is the cheerleader, the helper, the peacemaker, the hostess, the muse. Please don't hurt me. Let me take care of you before you hurt me. Is any of this ringing true to you guys? Does any of this feel like you? Here is the problem of survival being your mission and you running the racket that is a survival stress response over and over and over and over and over again with any relationship in any situation. Threat, 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 threat. The world is dangerous. People are the enemy. And you just react to everything that happens. Is you remain in the present. Survival is designed to keep you alive right now. You don't dream, you don't create, you don't plan, you survive. In that way, survival hijacks your life timeline. All you've done is survive the present time. You can't build a future when your body doesn't believe you'll survive the day. The other issue of running a threat response all the time is threat becomes your operating system. When threat is the lens, when fear and survival is the lens through which you look, and everyone is a threat, every opportunity looks risky, every relationship looks dangerous and unstable, every delay feels like danger, every quiet moment feels like abandonment. You can't even just sit with someone who's thinking about it. If you have conflict in a relationship, you give no space to that because immediately the quiet moment feels like abandonment. And instead of vision, you get vigilance. You're just on guard. Instead of purpose, you get pattern. And you're just cycling and cycling and cycling through a pattern. The third problem of running a constant survival pattern is you have no vision in life. The mission is survival. It has motion, but no direction. You do things, you hustle, you serve, you stay busy, you win. You can even be a big winner when you're running these survival rackets, but deep down, you're not moving toward anything. You're just trying to stay above water. And that right there is the funk in action. And the result on page 133 of the funk in action, it hijacks your timeline. Threat becomes your OS. You have a visionless mission. You see no vision for your life. And here's what I want to tell you, a personal story. So first, before I tell you this personal story, I'm going to define vision and mission. So vision is the ability to see. The ability to see the area that you can see from a particular position. So what do you see with a vision? You see the future. You see a future in your life. You have an ability to see. What do you see? The area that you see is the future. You have an ability to think. You have an ability to think about or plan the future with great imagination and intelligence. This wrecks me, man. This conversation totally wrecks me. And I'll tell you why it wrecks me. It wrecks me because if you want to know why I'm doing this at all, I developed all of this insight. I was gifted all of this insight. I didn't develop it through any intelligence. I had an experience that allowed the veil to lift. And I'll share that with you. And I want to hopefully, my hope, my prayer is through this journey that veil lifts for you as well. That's not something that I can do. That's something that has to be done. But I just think to myself, if I had the veil lifted, the veil had lifted earlier, my life would look so different. And I'll tell you the story of someone whose veil lifted early in life. When I went to college, I was learning German. German was my second major. And there was a woman that lived where I lived in my sorority. I had a sorority. I went to a sorority. She was in the same sorority with me. Her name is Heather. If you're watching, Heather, you made a huge impact on my life. But Heather was taking French. And we didn't know each other well. Even though we lived in the same house, we really didn't, I don't know, we didn't, our circles of friends didn't really interact that much, but she was lovely. I thought she was lovely. And so Heather and I were walking home from the language center. So there was a language, she was taking French, I was taking German, but we were both in this language center together. And we were walking back together and we were just making small talk because, again, we lived in the same house, but we weren't really friends. Anyway, I remember asking her why she was taking French. And she said, without hesitation, I want to become a CIA agent. And I was like, what now? Like, it so stunned me that a person would have a vision outside of the present moment. Because at that time I was in college, but all of this stuff that I've talked to you about that happened at 7, the falling out of a window at 7 years old, the schism that it developed in my identity, all the patterning that developed because of that. I was in college, but I was not living in a collegiate body, a 20-year-old body. I was still 7 years old, just trying to survive the day. And I encountered a woman who actually had a vision for her life. She could see an area and was taking actions in the present to go into a future that she envisioned. And I could not compute how that happened. I had no idea how she came to understand the idea of developing a vision for her life. I had a visionless mission. My mission was to survive the day. The vision of that kind of mission is darkness. It's just darkness. So if you find yourself or notice that you have had a visionless mission, identify when you stopped vision casting your life. Write it down. How did you make survival your mission? And can you think of a person? Do you have a Heather in your life who actually had a vision for their life? There's another woman that I met shortly after that. It was right after college. I lived in Chicago and I encountered this woman named Julia. And man, that woman totally rocked my world. She had a vision for her life and she was able to be opportunistic. She had some things that occurred and she took opportunities as they came up. So it's not about not responding. Like, it's not about having a vision that's locked in and you're going to do this thing or you're not going to do anything at all. But it's about aiming yourself in the direction of the future and having an idea of who you want to be in life, where you might want to go, what you might want to do. I just was like trying not to puke on people. You know what I'm saying? I was out with my dad one day, also in college. I was out with my dad. I was home from college on a college break and we were driving. And I remember traffic was kind of backed up and we couldn't really see entirely where traffic was backed up. And we approached very slowly. We could see some police and we could see some cars and whatever. And it became very evident that, that someone had tried to cross the crosswalk and was struck by a vehicle and was dead. And there was a body in the crosswalk and a sheet covering the body. And I remember saying to my dad oh gosh, look at that. Someone has died. And, it looks like someone's died. And my dad just in a lovely way where my dad was also executing a stress response. And my dad's stress response is nothing to see here, nothing to see, nothing's bad. Nothing's bad. He said to me, oh, they're just probably trying to keep the dust off them. They've covered the corpse in a white sheet just to keep the dust off that person. But that person's alive. Don't worry. Don't worry, child. My dad trying to be the protector, protecting his child from the ugly in life. And I remember, because we are always constantly searching for symbols to make sense of our internal reality, I remember thinking, that person is me. I am a corpse hiding in plain sight. If you are a dead man walking, it is because you died to yourself a long time ago, quite likely. When you execute a constant stress response, when you have at the core of your being a schism that says something is wrong with me, and you develop a story around it that says, I am 50 cents on the dollar, I am broken, unworthy, unlovable, unlikable, less than, and you develop a persona that executes your life to try to keep you from pain, you have died to yourself. All the potential you had when you were born, all the hopes and dreams woven into your heart and mind is gone. When we believed we were unworthy and began executing behaviors that discounted our worth and value to the world and to ourselves, we died inside. 50-cent thinking may have started with the belief that you were a person on discount, but the impact is the wholesale death of a life. The last subchapter in chapter 2, The Fall and the Funk, is entering the wilderness. I'll tell you a quick story. I told you the story about the traumatic brain injury that I sustained when I fell out of a window, but I had a second traumatic brain injury. I was in a massive car accident in Los Angeles driving down Sunset Boulevard. And when I was in the ambulance, the cop came up to the back of the ambulance where I was sitting, and he just kept saying, you should be dead. You should be dead. And he was staring at me, and he kept saying, you should be dead. And he even told me that another woman had had a very similar accident to mine, and actually less severe. Well, less severe in the impact of the accident, but more severe in that it took her life. He kept saying to me, you should be dead. And he was waiting for me to react, and I didn't. There was nothing there. You should be dead got no response. And the reason it got no response is because I had been running survival for so long in my life, and I had died to myself so long ago that I was no longer in life. I was in what I call the wilderness. And the definition of the wilderness is an uncultivated, uninhabited, and inhospitable region, a place that people do not take care of or control. The Old English of the word wilderness is a land inhabited by only wild animals. And that is the reality of the stress reaction. It is a primal animal response. You are no longer a human being. You are living in this animalistic, primal nature. You are completely disassociated, not only from yourself, but from this idea of being human at all. I want to take a minute at the end of this chapter and end it by speaking life over you, because that is a whole lot of death. Safety was never meant to be the goal. Survival was never your mission. The center of gravity that you spin around is meant to be something that gives life, not just avoids death. This whole journey is about taking you from death to life. This entire process isn't about rising from tragedy. It's about realigning to the core and spinning your entire life around a different orbit. This is about an axis correction. You're spinning around the wrong axis. When you replace the truth of who you are with safety, that doesn't make you safe. It doesn't make you secure. It makes you small. It makes you diminished. It makes you invisible. It makes you dead. There is a lie at the core of your being that says you're 50 cents on the dollar. You have to survive. I posit, only because I know it to be true, that there is a truth about who you are that says you are worth full price. That is the journey that we're on. The journey that doesn't take you from being 50 cents on the dollar to a full dollar through behaviors or even beliefs. This is about you understanding the truth that you are full price and that there is a redemption available for you in your life that doesn't have you bought at a discount, but has you bought at full price. We are not going to stop here. This is only volume 1. There are 4, and we are only this far into it. Please stay with me. I've spent my entire day getting this chapter out, but it's only chapter 2, and there are 29. Please, if you are feeling dead to yourself, stick around, because we are going to bring you back to life.